Hello and welcome. This is the 7th episode of the bitsvsbytes podcast. I am your host, Ame Grigic, and today I have Pepijn Schoen from Voya.ai. Welcome.
Thank you.
I would like to start off with a little bit about your background.
Sure.
How did you get into IT? And maybe after that you can tell me how did you get to Voya as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into IT because in high school I was very bored from having to learn German words, and instead I crept behind my computer. While doing that, I joined back then a virtual pet website, which was pretty big. It was called Neopets, and I thought it was pretty awesome. And I replicated some of that myself, or at least I joined a smaller version of that website. Somehow I got access to the FTP credentials there, and eventually started reading up some code. Found it pretty interesting, and then instead of doing math, which I originally wanted to study, I started getting more and more interested in IT. And so from 15 on, I started writing software, then went to uni as well in the Netherlands afterwards.
Okay, and did you also have from a young age, did you also have kind of an interest for computers as well, like building them, or did you have that as well?
Not too much. I mean, I thought they were interesting. I thought machines were interesting. I was very fascinated by trains when I was younger. But computers, yeah, I mean, the software runs on them.
Yeah, it's mostly the software part, right?
Yeah,
That's interesting for you. Yeah, cool. And how did you get to Voya? So what was that path like?
Yeah, so after uni, I worked for an R&D company in Utrecht for some time. And the R&D part was really interesting, really developing innovative stuff. But the marketing part, or actually selling the product, the business part of that was a bit lacking. And I joined Startup Bootcamp after that, which is an accelerator year in Amsterdam. I did two programs there. I did a program in London, and there I also met my former company, TripRebel. They were part of that program.
Mm-hmm.
Their CTO had left, and they asked me to join them. And while they were doing this program in Amsterdam, they were actually from Hamburg. So after that program, after doing the mentorship for that program with them, I joined them and also moved to Hamburg.
Okay.
So this was already in the travel space, so the B2C travel space. We're a hotel booking platform. We monitored prices, and when prices dropped, we canceled the old booking, made a new booking in that place. But that kind of small edge was too small to really make a play in the market. That meant that not this January, but the one before, in 2017, we went insolvent and sold part of the technology to Voya.
Okay.
Afterwards, so I cycled around for a few months in the Netherlands trying to figure out what to do then. And I sent them another email saying, well, I wouldn't mind joining
Voya as well.
That's right.
And how did Voya start out? Because that's also it's an interesting company to say the least. But how did they start out?
Sure. So they were always the founders, Max and Florian, they were always interested in conversational commerce and also in the travel space. And they started pretty broad with offering to answer any kind of requests. So that is both if you do a business trip to Frankfurt, but if you go to with your family to Mallorca, they would organize those travel for you, and then eventually they realized that only the business part of that was really interesting. It's really where the volume lies, and also where the operational feasibility lies, because the amount of nitpicking you have to do to figure out the right kind of hotel with the right kind of beach close by was a bit too much effort for them.
Yeah, and to summarize a little bit about what Voya does, you have a chat app, right?
That's
or
correct.
Actually, it's a chat, but it's in a web app form and in a form on iPhone and Android.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you actually do? So what does your service provide?
So we do something very traditional, which is business travel, where usually you would pick up the phone and talk to your call center agent, and they would suggest you flights for your trip to Frankfurt and hotels close by. And we do the same. So we organize your flights, your hotels, your rental car, your train trips. But then through an app. So through conversational commerce, you do a request, so you write to us, or you fill a form of where you need to go. and our operational staff or our AI picks up that and suggests flights to you.
Okay, and what types of other travel do you have? Is it only flights or?
No, so it's flights, hotel, rental cars, and train. In our main market in Germany, also all of those travel types are pretty big. As Germany is a pretty big country.
Yeah. So you mentioned it already. It's a German-based startup as well.
Yeah.
What type of clients do you see? What kind of clients do you do service? Is that like bigger companies, or does it vary as well?
So I think we have the companies that we work with are largely at the moment SMEs, so larger SMEs as it is. And the longer that we process on this trajectory, the bigger the clients also get. So we used to start with small startups as well, 5 to 10 people. As the more corporates or bigger companies had more demands, that is better travel management, better guideline management, duty of care, so that in case there's an earthquake somewhere, that they would know where their travelers are. And these are also the features that we have been building. So currently, the ideal customer for us is SME, around 100, 200 employees, 1 million euros a year of travel volume, and we serve those kinds.
Did you really pick the conversational interface to be the main interface for booking? Because you could use just a normal process of going through an ordering process as well. What was the reasoning behind using a conversational interface?
That's right. So the conversational interface helped us to get started in the first place. There's many exceptions, and I think the exceptions make the business shine. So we don't want to say, oh, you want to fly to Sydney? Well, then you have to book with a different provider. So we started with the conversational interface as a sort of a catch-all solution where you can serve any kind of customer. And so it's also the thing that we're focusing on now is making the simpler request more accessible. So offering an online booking tool like experience where you can search for flights, browse through flights yourself. The strength in the conversational part is that it also can do these extra steps. So in case you need a visa for traveling to Russia, we can also take care of that. And in case you have a much more complicated request that really requires explanation on where you need to go, what time you need to be there, then the conversational part excels in that. Yeah,
because you can, if someone has a question about that trip, they can just probably can ask it, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And why would people prefer to do it this way in regards to using a conversational interface instead of a normal ordering process? Why would they do that?
So there's a lot of service that comes with it. So there's a lot of personal touch to it. The people feel taken care of instead of having this bland type of online booking tool. And then also as compared, so that is the one extreme, right? The online booking tool. And then compared to the other, also very personal extreme of a call center agent, which also happens a lot in business travel. They are under pressure to perform as quickly as possible. So there's no time for real attention to the request, for understanding the request. And so you'll be picking up the call, which is synchronous. So you cannot sit back on your couch and request a trip from them. Added to that, there's the pressure from them to serve as many requests as they can. So they'll be trying to hang up on you as soon as possible again. So
yeah, and people are not scalable, right? I always say
that's right. Yeah. That's right. I mean, people are scalable to an extent.
Yeah,
but
to an extent.
The challenge is how to give them superpower. So in that sense, they scale, and that's also our, let's say, most of our automation challenges. To make the workforce that we have more effective at doing what they do, and also giving them interesting stuff to work on, because booking a flight from Amsterdam to Frankfurt is not really
interesting,
top of the bill type of interesting, but organizing a complicated round trip and also visas included, that's really what these people studied for. So that's what we love to offer them.
Yeah, and the initial contact that you have with the chat app, how does that go? Does that go through a kind of process that you go through, or and you later on maybe get an agent that talks to you? How does that work? So is it mostly automated, or is it also for a part a real agent that's talking to you?
So there's usually a real agent talking to you.
Okay.
We just try to make them more efficient. So there's definitely, if you get started, then also your company has been onboarded, so the right kind of guidelines are in place. So the travel manager determines the kind of budgets that you have for. Maybe in San Francisco you can spend €250 a night, but London 150 a night. These kinds of configurations are already in place, and they'll be inviting you. And that also will start with a chatbot, so to say, onboarding you on the application, so getting you used to the conversational interface. Because so many people are nowadays used to chat, so they know what to do, but they're not as used to this hybrid mix of you don't know when you're talking to an AI or to a person, and how does that change your interaction, right? So Max, one of the co-founders, always jokes that you never talk polite to Siri, right? You direct Siri in saying, call my mum. If you talk like this to a person, it's pretty rude. So there's some onboarding that we're trying to do, and but there's also some emphasis that we're trying to give to the users that are talking to a real person. Yeah,
because do you differentiate between when someone is talking to a bot and a person?
Not at the moment. So it's something that we definitely are looking into. So should we label everything with bot, but that might feel impersonal. So currently we have one of the people that started that joined very early on. Her name is Sarah, and currently you're always talking with Sarah. Which also means that sometimes we get a call and people ask, like, I'd like to talk with Sarah, and we just don't know who to give the phone to.
She doesn't exist.
She doesn't exist. Sorry to ruin your dreams.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because I thought it was more AI, but you're kind of using it in a way that you don't need to do the repetitive stuff, right?
That's
so
right.
Like the onboarding and stuff like that.
The onboarding part, the approval part. So if you have to book outside of your guidelines, outside of the budget, that conversation is taken care of, and then also eventually the finding the right kind of travel options for this person. So if you write very clearly, I want to fly from Amsterdam to Frankfurt on these and these dates. With natural language processing, you'll be able to parse that kind of request, and the rest of them, the more complicated requests, you hand over.
Yeah, because in what languages do you support right now?
German and English. Yeah. It's also matching the operational stuff that we have. Yeah,
exactly. And looking at the AI, because you've mentioned it a few times right now, there seems to be a lot of buzz around it, right? So lately, it's kind of taking flight, like it's going to solve everything. If you look at that, what do you think? Where do we think we stand right now on that premise? Because in my opinion, it's still in its kind of infancy, and it still revolves a lot around someone coding something.
Sure,
and that kind of beats the meaning of artificial intelligence, right?
Well, does it? I mean, AI for a part is also when people aren't able to tell the difference,
that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's true.
A clever algorithm or heuristic is also artificial intelligence if people perceive it as intelligence. So if the flight ranking, we also use AI for that, and the AI is not so complicated, right? You show the cheapest ones first, and the shortest ones first, and then you show the rest.
Yeah.
It's AI in itself. So I think the applied AI part is interesting. There's a lot of buzz also around machine learning, but the amount of data that you need, etc., make it for many companies, or at least many people at the moment, academic. Which is there's a large gap between applied AI and academic AI. But for example, here in Rotterdam, and also here near the office of Tevreden, there's an automatic vehicle already driving since 1996, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
So
there's
this bus already doing its thing, its AI thing, at least the thing what people see, a lot of people feel as AI, which is automatic vehicles or self-driving cars, already since 1996.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of a prestige product, of course. But it breaks down a lot as well.
Yeah, well, I've seen it also.
It works. It does work.
Yeah,
it actually does work. It's really a weird feeling to step into a car with no driver. And
so for a part, AI is there, right? But for a large part, also AI is still work in progress.
Yeah. So what would you say is what would be the state if you look at it from, I said infancy, but probably it's a little bit more than that. What do you think?
you really want to have some other players other than, for example, Google picking
Amazon.
up some speed with collecting data, with applying AI, because so if machine learning, if that is data-based, then there will be a monopoly on AI, because the person that holds most data will be able to make the best kinds of decisions, right? So leveling the playing field will need a lot of different people, of different parties to play on that playing field. And I think that really has to come in the coming years.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at the flight data, because you need some kind of data from, these are the hotels and these are the flights that you can book. How do you work with that? Do you have like partners that you work with, or you do it directly through the companies themselves?
So flight, that's also the tricky part of applied AI. I think that a lot of people face with, in that you will become a system integrator, right? You can't really innovate on the AI. Yeah. You can use the stuff that is off the shelf or that is low hanging, but you'll be also connecting to, for example, Booking.com, or you'll be connecting to also the the airline aggregators. You need to pick your battles. So definitely we work with partners to get flight content and get hotel content, and couple those with the AI stuff that we have.
Yeah, because you're not going to make a better aggregator than the airline aggregators.
Definitely
there.
not.
Yeah,
definitely not.
Yeah, so it's better to work with them than actually start something new, right?
Absolutely. I think many people have tried and also failed.
Yeah. So you get it from multiple sources, right? So you get it from Booking.com and maybe other.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a partnership with Booking.com. We have a few partnerships with different airline aggregators, and they provide us the data that we eventually book.
Yeah, because you're not doing it directly with airlines as well, right? Because that would be a little bit tricky.
So the airline system is also an interesting system on itself, because it predates internet as well. The airline information used to be faxed over or sent over fax, or it would be sent also over telephone via sort of internet-like protocol. But before internet, and also before kind of security was there, you're probably heard of the name Amadeus being the backbone of all of that.
Yeah.
And it's not only it's not Amadeus in that sense, not an API, but it's also an administrative system for the airlines. So there's the airlines also have no real alternative for their internal operations except for offering it through these kind of existing global distribution systems, GDSs.
Yeah.
So there is actually very little opportunity to work directly with airlines. So you always have to work with aggregators, because the amount of stuff that you would need to integrate yourself in order to do that is just humongous.
And that's interesting, because I thought that the airlines when you look at the airlines and how smooth their process is in most cases, it's interesting to me that from your story, what you're telling me is actually that a lot of those airlines are also finding an upward battle with their own systems.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Lufthansa recently published Direct Connect, which is also really a direct API for booking Lufthansa flights. But you can't reserve seats over it. That's only to be done through GDSs. And also these airlines are also more complicated in that these GDSs are also more complicated in that they also cover, for example, the very pragmatic stuff of weights and balances, which is where do people have to sit into the airplane so that the airplane can actually take off.
Yeah.
Right. And also Lufthansa flights or KLM flights are usually code-shared between other airlines, and how can those airlines also book on that flight under its own code share? So it's so deeply integrated. It's just
that's
like
crazy,
it's just a worldwide spaghetti code that nobody can disentangle.
And we're working, or actually you're working with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on the consuming end in that sense, but I'm definitely not trying to solve that part.
No, okay. It's more, as you said, it's more to make it a little bit more, a lot more convenient for someone to book their whole trip, right?
Correct. It makes you appreciate waiting or loading times at airline websites a bit more if you know what stuff is behind there.
Yeah.
But
that's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because so that's actually the reason why those loading times are that well, in most cases, you can probably wait for half a minute before
Correct.
you get
it's just
response.
layers and layers of caches. I mean, even Google Flights did it pretty well, but they have also cached it themselves internally, which means that when you, well, they've used AI to figure out when price changes are quite likely, and then they will positively refresh their cache. But in the end, their information is also cached based on a cache that lies at Amadeus, based on a cache that lies at wherever.
Yeah, and that's something that I didn't think about before, because I was always like, okay, are they really not able to get this any faster than it is right now?
It's just outdated systems.
Okay. And getting back to a little bit about Voya. So, how many people work at Voya right now?
So we currently work with around 50 people. So 15 people of those in the product and tech teams. The rest of them in sales, account management, operational, finance, BI, these kind of things.
Yeah, and how many started out as a founding team? How many were there?
2.
Okay.
So we start with 2 people. Very quickly, Sarah came on board to also help with operations. When I joined, last year in May, we were around 20 or so, and since then we've grown to now 50.
50, okay. And what are kind of struggles when scaling to this? Because 50 is it's kind of a number in my head. It's always kind of a number that where everything starts to go into processes and more, maybe not bureaucratic, but
middle management starts to exist, right? These kind of things.
Yeah. What kind of struggles did you see there? What did you guys do about that?
Well, there's definitely some growth pains, and the good thing is that there's growth pains because there is a success, right?
Yeah,
so there's no disagreement on how we have to rescue the sinking ship. It's just more fighting about different ideas of how to best move forwards, which is in a sense exciting, because any kind of good idea in the end you'll be able to trust that will lead us to the best path forward. Whereas at the starting company, you really are very close to doing operations yourself, and you see what customers want. When growing, you have less time for that, and traditionally also the decision power is in your hands. So empowering other people, but also making the information as transparent as possible to make sure that other people have enough information to make decisions. That has been a good challenge.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, because you live in Brussels, right?
That's right.
And Voya is in Hamburg.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned in our conversation before the podcast that you guys have developers in Romania, right?
That's right.
How does everybody interact? Because it's a kind of a remote company, or actually it is a remote company.
Yeah, if you have one person remote, then your company is per definition remote, because otherwise this person will miss out on information. We use Slack, which is not the best, but kind of the best of the worst. I mean, it helps to spread information. We do a lot of calls, so we have a lot of shared meetings where people dial in, and luckily all decision processes are asynchronous, so you hardly ever have to really be in the same room at the same time to be able to participate, to be able to get information. And what we also do is we have a lot of people, at least definitely me, but also the developers and the product team in Bucharest and the operational staff in Hamburg. They all visit each other, so to say, and that also helps us at eating our own dog food, in sense of also doing business travel ourselves, to see, and also booking stuff through our own tool to see how that works, where kind of barriers lie, whether we are at the hotel and we are asked to pay again even though the company has already paid. So it also helps to this kind of remoteness. Well, the company being remote and having to travel to meet helps to also figure out problems in your own processes.
Yeah, because how frequent are you in Hamburg? at the moment?
I'm in Hamburg once or twice a month, and also in Bucharest once or twice a month. So I'm picking up the schedule of being there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at either of those locations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, it has to be. You have to be in contact with those people, right? If you want to work together.
Yeah, you want to observe how the operational staff uses the application. You want to sit down with with some of the developers to have a coffee and talk about how they're doing. You need to visit customers to see how they're perceiving the application. So some of it, I mean, there's no good virtual replacement for
face to face.
For face to face.
Yeah,
I think I'm not sure who suggested it, but a problem with meetings or with teleconferences is also that the webcam is never in the middle of the screen, so there's never eye contact. Also,
that's actually true. Yeah.
Also, when doing this remote, and then there's also still the.
It's weird to look into the camera because that looks creepy.
It looks very creepy. And there's also still the issues with internet connection while doing voice calls. Somehow not completely solved yet. So yeah, meeting in person is also very important to get at least everybody looking into the same direction and moving forward.
And looking at your development team, do you use some kind of methodology like Scrum or whatever to create your product, or what?
Yeah, we started doing Scrum. So when I joined, I converted. We did Scrum on paper, but I think Agile is really only done when you understand first principles, right? So we did Scrum, but Scrum meant that stuff that wasn't done in the 2 weeks before just moved standard to the next 2 weeks without rethinking whether it was really important, without trying to reduce the scope, etc., etc. We ran with Scrum for a year, so we had one team then, and in September, we split to 2 different teams, and now one of these, and then we converted in April or May to using squads, as described as made famous by Spotify. But squads are pretty much just self-organizing units, and they've chosen mostly to work with Scrum still. One of them is now dropping also sprints. That is, they don't really believe in the Monday synchronization on what's most important. I mean, they are in that sense that independent or that interwoven with the other teams that they will travel to Hamburg and observe how people use the application, and for that don't need necessarily 2-week synchronization moments in order to figure out what to work on.
Yeah, because you have multiple teams. Yeah, then you need the synchronization, or
right. You need the information sharing somehow, but only in some. Well, Scrum is just one solution to it.
Yeah, because we're doing it as well. Doing it daily every day, and doing sprint planning every 2 weeks and stuff like that. And you notice that works, even though you're not there. But as you said, the personal contact is. Yeah, you cannot replace that with anything. That's also why we do it every half year. I go to our developers and talk about what the next projects are going to be, and that's helped, because if I would have to do that through video conferencing, one, it would take more time, and two, it's harder to explain some things.
Yeah, of course.
Because you can, when you're face to face, you can just write on a board and
you can do a workshop together. They can ask more questions. It's just more open.
Yeah. And we have the fortunate thing that they are in the same time zone.
Yeah.
You have that as well.
Well, it's 1 hour difference. But
yeah, it's
not too bad.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, when you're working with India or something like that, or maybe America or whatever,
it can be more clumsy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and so looking at those meetings, because you sometimes have those meetings, or actually more the interaction in the chat rooms, because you will probably have chat rooms as well. Do you require people to work the same hours as you are at that moment? Because there is a little time reference, but is that really a thing?
That's tricky. So we do have office hours now, also in Bucharest, but it's mostly for them. It's not as much for me. So we think it's valuable for people to be there for some hours of the day during when also other people are in office, so that they can also do knowledge sharing, knowledge building, and so on. But also our operational staff is available from 7 in the morning until 10 in the evening, but in shifts. So the working times are quite different for different people in the teams.
Yeah.
So we don't require them to work at the same amount of hours that we work, or at the same kind of hours that we do.
Yeah, it's not a 9 to 5 or whatever. I mean,
it's not 9 to 5, and I think that's also not. It might not be too helpful, as some people are not morning persons, right? And,
it's actually true. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of our developers prefer to come into the office at 10:30, but they also leave only at 8:30 or so, and I think that's perfectly fine, as long as there's some room for interaction, right? So if you're really a night owl, then there's less of a cultural fit, at least with our current configuration.
Yeah, that could make a little bit of problems, of course, but I kind of mirror that always to what they do at Basecamp. I don't know if you follow that. They also tell, like, okay, we don't really have hours that people are working, because they cannot have hours. With them, it's even more of a time difference, of course.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how those kind of remote things work, right? I mean, it's totally different dynamic from having everyone in the same spot and you're working on.
Absolutely. I mean, my previous company, TripRebel, we also had all our software developers in Hamburg, and there's definitely a hugely different atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at what you guys are doing, for me, it's interesting to see always what the next step is. So what do you think you'll be going in the future after, for example, the conversational interfaces? What do you think the next steps are?
Well, I really like what Airbnb has done when they started building houses in Florida, because they looked at the data and they realized that too many people are trying to go on holiday in Florida, right? There's a shortage of apartments to let, and I think that's a beautiful example of really a horizontal startup that really tries to look at all the customers' problems and try to solve all of those. And I'd love to take a similar slice of the business travel sector. So there's more stuff in travel management that includes also expense management, when you've taken a taxi, when you've treated a client to a dinner at a restaurant. Those kinds of costs you also want to have expensed at the company. And we'll also be looking at building those kinds of solutions. If you want to take that as a vision, then, well, we can also be flying around in a Voya helicopter to bring customers to remote locations. But I think we'll be a few years out of that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, what Airbnb is doing is that's something that I talked about in the last podcast as well, where I had an architecture company that's actually building solar panels, right? I mean, it's totally different than what they normally do. They have the idea. The idea is good, but creating that is going to be a lot more difficult than doing that.
Yeah, but our customers want it, apparently. So.
Yeah. They want it, and they see some kind of things that are interesting there. So it's interesting that the thing you say as something that's in the future is actually other products, not an improvement on what you're already. Of course, you're going to improve your product that you have.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting to realize when the product is good enough, right, and when it's time to also look at other solutions.
Yeah, and you can, of course, you can scale the product that you already have almost indefinitely.
Right.
And as AI will get better, it will be even more of a scalability, right?
Yeah.
So. To wrap up, I would like to know, since you started at Voya, what's the thing that you're most proud of since you started?
Well, I'll mention two things. Just one thing, because I like the technology part of it. I've picked up a lot of Kubernetes over the past year, and also then replacing our entire infrastructure with Kubernetes and lots of microservices has been super interesting. So we still have a beautiful monolith in the center that we'd love to get to replace at one point. But at least for this has helped us serving as an example project for how we were to build the application in the future. If you have a new one, or you start to build when we have a new one, or when we have new kinds of solutions, new kinds of products, then we always try to think of it as in microservices first. And the other thing that really comes with is really a cultural part, which is the culture change that had to happen when growing from 20 to 50 people. There is this entire transparency and empowerment structure that I think people have also people have had a lot of patience on us putting the right thing in place, on putting the right kind of processes, putting the right kind of meetings, putting the right kind of data for them to see how the company is doing, what to make decisions based on, to put that in place. So, both of these achievements are very internal, but I think that's also where I like to work most, which is making the people happy around me, so that they can make the end users happy.
Exactly. And something sprang to mind. So there's one question also that I would like to ask you as well, because in our world, or actually the world that we work in, it's a lot about budgets and how many money, how much money you can spend on kind of things. If you didn't have budget restrictions, what would be the thing that you would do? Or actually, what would you change or add to what you're doing right now?
It's a good question. Well, I think the most interesting thing to have, that we spent money on IT equipment, and we spent money on HR, right, on human resources,
of course.
And I would try to add as many people to the company as possible. But that also doesn't mean an infinite amount of people, right? Because the amount of growth that you can have on your internal team, or the stress that you can have on your internal team, adding people to the company. I think Uber has become very stressed at some years ago when they tried to hire anyone without any kind of interview.
Yeah.
I would not like to be in that position, so I would love to make the team grow 50% in 6 months, and then another 50%, and so on. And that's with infinite budget, I would probably focus on
skill.
On training people and on finding brilliant people.
Yeah, because the way you find people now, because it is in Romania, and you started the Romanian company as well to get those people in, because there's a shortage of developers, let's be honest. Yep. Maybe not in those countries, it's a little bit less than, for example, the Netherlands. How do you go about that? Because that's something that also came to mind where you're just talking about that.
Yeah, we have a recruiter working there with us, because there is some cultural differences that we have to bridge, and there's some hands-on there as well that I don't as much have. So we have someone that works with us there. The good thing is that people are pretty excited there also by startups, and that people are interested also in specifically that part of getting more transparency, more participation into the companies, right? Not just building software for companies, as ING and Deutsche Bank are also pretty big there. They just delegate quality assurance there, and there's a lot of brilliant people there. There's a good university system, and then offering an exciting opportunity at a young startup where you also can fly to Hamburg, can participate in deciding where the company goes, is quite attractive.
Yeah, and you're actually part of the company, right?
You're part of the company. You're not part of a realization or an implementation team. Right?
Yeah.
So you'll be studying the agents, the operational staff. You'll be talking to customers to see what they want, and you'll be deciding that expense management is interesting, but let's focus on X now, right? We make those decisions together also with our product team.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, I would like to thank you for your time.
Not a problem.
And for the listeners, of course, you can find Bits vs. Bytes on Instagram, Twitter, and SoundCloud. The name is bitsvsbytes. And also, this podcast will be on bitsvsbytes.com. Thank you.